I'm Chris from Tiger Spreadsheet Solutions and welcome back to the Spreadsheet Skunkworks, the series where we try to explore the capabilities of computer coding, particularly the capabilities of Excel VBA, by trying to create a chess computer, or at least seeing how close we can get to creating a chess computer in Excel. If you want a full introduction to the series, check out the first video in the series. There will be a playlist below this video with all of the videos in. So with that said, let's get into what is now the fifth video into the series. You can download the file from the website. The link is below this video. So let's quickly recap. We've got to a situation where we're trying to represent the pieces on the board, and we've just got one piece at the moment. We've got one white pawn, which is this piece here, and we've managed to create some code to just position the shape on the board. How did we do that? Well, we used some Visual Basic, we used some variables here, we used the offset method here, some properties, and this has allowed us to position the piece where we want to position it. Also important is this table we're building on a supporting sheet, so the user's not going to see this sheet. I've called this sheet engine because it's going to contain information that's going to keep the spreadsheet running efficiently. And we're building a table here. Now the aim of this video, and I'm got to say I'm particularly excited about this video because the aim of this video is to harness the power of loops. We've got a piece of code here that seems to be working well, but at the moment it's only working, we're only going through the loop once. We do have a loop here, but we're only going through it once. We want to harness the power of loops to go through this loop multiple times, to do the same job multiple times. How many times do we want to do this job? Well, how many pieces are there on the chessboard? There's 16 white pieces, 16 black pieces. So we want to loop through this code 32 times and position all of the pieces on the chessboard. So we can have a button next to the chessboard here saying reset the chessboard. We can click it, all of the pieces will appear in the correct positions. So that's the challenge for this video. Might sound like a lot to do, but as I said, with the power of loops, we've got some code that's working fairly well. Harness the power of loops, repeat that task 32 times, get it done at the click of a button. So where are we going to start here? As I said, we've got some code to position the shape we've got that's representing the pawn. So we're positioning it on the board, and we've got some information in the table here. This table is going to gradually populate. We've got some information in the table that positions the piece in the correct place. So we've done the positioning, but we kind of missed a stage out, which is we need to duplicate this shape. We need to take a shape, copy paste it so that we have a new shape for each piece on the board. So that's the first task we're going to deal with in this video. How do we handle that process? Copy pasting a shape, duplicating it many times. What's the best way to deal with that? Well, firstly, I'm going to copy the shape we've got. Just selected the shape, Control C on a Windows PC. Copy the shape and paste it in here. Now I'm going to store the shape on this engine sheet because, you know, I don't want the user to be able to easily access this kind of reference shape that we're using to create all of the other shapes. It's also beneficial because I know, as the developer, I know it's on this sheet, and we can change the appearance of this shape very easily because we're copy pasting this shape multiple times. Changes that I make to this shape will be reflected in the other shapes too. So this approach, storing the shape in the back end where I can make changes to it if I want, and those changes will be reflected when we run the code, seems like a sensible approach to me. So the name of this shape at the moment, I can see in the top left, the name box. The name of the shape is currently oval 1. That's not particularly informative. That's the generic name that Excel has given the shape. So let's call it ref shape, short for reference shape. That seems like a sensible name for what is literally a reference shape for us. I'm just going to store it up here for the time being. So we've got a reference shape, and we want to, every time we work through this code, we want to copy paste this shape. So this is our first coding challenge. What are we going to do? We've got to create some new code. So yeah, we could write this code ourselves manually. I could probably manage that myself, but often it's easier to record code. Use the macro recorder in Excel, record the code, and then subsequently examine the code, tweak it, get it working for us. This is a good way to generate new code. Not all code, as you can see from my videos, not all code is organic, not all code is written by the developer. I'd say the majority of the code is either recorded from the macro recorder or recycled from another routine that works well. So we've got code coming from different places. An important source of code is the macro recorder. So where's the macro recorder? Developer tab, and then record macro. Let's give the macro an informative name. Copy shape will be fine. Now I can hit OK. Excel is now recording the code. In the bottom left-hand corner, just outside of your screenshot, I've got a stop symbol now, and we can see we've now got stop recording here. So that shows that we're currently recording a macro. So I want to copy paste this shape, and let's just paste it onto the board sheet, because that's the sheet where we're going to position the shape eventually. So just copy it in there, Control V. That's all we want to do for the time being. So I'm going to go back to the developer tab. Important to remember to stop the macro recorder, otherwise Excel is going to keep recording the code. You won't be able to make sense of it in the end. So I'm going to hit stop recording now. Now we've got to go and locate that code. So I'm going to the Visual Basic Editor, Alt and F11 in a Windows PC. Now, where is that code going to be? Usually, if you record a macro, Excel will create a new module for that macro to go in. And we've got a new module here, module 4. And this is the code I've just created. I can tell that it's the code I just created by looking at the name of the macro, copy shape. That was the name I typed into the dialog box when I was asked to give the macro a name. So this is the code that we're going to work on. I'm going to make some tweaks to this now. I'm going to start by just clearing out the annotations that Excel has given us. And let's just reduce the indentation, so Shift Tab. That means you can see it in your screenshot. So I'm going to make some adjustments here. So rather than active sheet.shapes.range, we can just say sheets engine. Sheets engine, which is the name of the sheet that contains our shape. There we go. Sheets engine dot shapes, and then ref underscore shape dot copy. So you can see in the end I did write the code myself, organically if you like, but we could get it to work easily with the code that's been given to us here. It helped me, just looking at that code, helped me to get some ideas going. This is the way I would write this code. So this is going to copy the shape, and then we want to select the board sheet. So I'm just going to clear out these lines of code for now. Select the board sheet. So I'm happy with these first two lines of code. So firstly, copying the shape and then selecting the board sheet. Happy with these two lines of code. Then finally, we want to paste the shape onto the sheet. So this active sheet.paste line of code also looks useful. This range G13.select, that was just me clicking on the sheet. And is that necessary for the code to work accurately? No, it's not. So let's get rid of that line of code too. And then I've got the 3 lines of code that I need. 1 line of code to copy the shape, 1 line of code to select the correct sheet, and 1 line of code to paste the shape in there. So a good example of recording some code, going into the Visual Basic Editor, and then tweaking the code, getting rid of the code we don't need, getting it working for us. So this code, I'm going to copy paste into the macro we're working on. This is the macro to position the pieces. And then let's drop it in here for now. So the first line of code, which is copying the shape, I'm going to put that at the top of the routine. We only need to copy the shape once. We don't need to copy the shape every time we go through the loop. And then these second 2 lines of code, I'm going to drop into the loop. just here. So these instructions here to select the board sheet and then to paste in, we're going to have to do that for each shape that we create. So we want that code to be inside the loop. Don't worry if you're not following this yet, it will become clear as we work through it. So we seem to be getting that. Let's just step into this code now and let's see if it's doing what we want it to do. We want it to copy the reference shape we created and then to paste that shape onto the board sheet. So I'm just going to step through the code. Firstly, what's the current situation on the board sheet? We've got two shapes there at the moment. I'm just going to get rid of one of them. So I'm expecting another shape to appear somewhere on the board sheet. Okay, using the F8 key to step into the code, you could click on debug at the top and step into F8 shortcut on a Windows PC. So we're copying the reference shape there into the loop. The loop's not important at the moment because we're only testing this. We're not going to work through it multiple times. Selecting the board sheet and then pasting in, and we can see our shape appearing there. So a good example there of just taking a small piece of new code and then just testing it. So just testing the new part of the code. If there was a problem, I could very precisely pin down where the problem is by doing that piece of testing there. So a little bit of testing, try to do the testing as you go along. It's going to save you, it's going to stop you getting really tangled up in the code. So a little bit of code in, do a test. If it seems to be good, then let's move on. Happy with that for the time being, and then let's just delete this shape again to avoid confusion later. Okay, so we've got copy pasting our reference shape and we've got it pasting onto the board sheet, so that's good. What else do we want to do with this shape? Well, we've done the positioning in the previous video. I would like to give this shape a name. I'd like to give this shape a name because later on I want to be able to reference the shapes precisely. I don't want them to just have generic names like oval 43, something like that. So I want to give the piece, the shape rather, a name as well. And we can see in column C here, in column C, I've put some of the piece names in already. So I want to attach this name to the new shape. So how might we do that? Well, let's take selection. Let's try selection. Not absolutely sure if this is going to work. Okay, we might have to go back to the macro recorder if this doesn't work, but let's just give this a test. And let's see if we can get this done just using selection. So the thing we have selected, changing the name. And again, let's just F8, step into the code, work through it. So I've pasted the shape in, and then what happens? Okay, yeah, so this selection.name line of code seemed to work fine. We can see the name of the shape is now test. So we've managed to change the name of the shape too. So again, putting in a new line of code, testing it. If it works well, then we can move on. So this seems to work fine, but what do we want to use for the name of the shape? You know, what names do we actually want to use? Well, we've got the entry in column C here contains the name of the shape that I actually want to use. So how do we get the right name, remembering that we're going to want to go down a row for each shape that we create? So how do we do that? Well, here's another example of how to generate code, recycling. So code that you know is working well, can you just copy paste it, tweak it and get it working again? I'm going to recycle some code here. So I know that this code here, let's have a look. Yeah, this code here is working well. So this code, it says get vertical position here, but this is actually horizontal position, because we're talking about columns. So I've left some annotations there. It wasn't quite accurate, the annotation, but you can see how the annotations can help you to understand what the code is doing when you come back later. But this line of code here is taking some information from the table, just looking at the line of code here, sheets engine.range e3.offset. So we're talking about the E column here. It's taking some information from the table and assigning it to a variable. Now, in the case of changing the name, we could assign it to a variable, but that's an unnecessary step. In this case, we can do it directly. So take the information from the table and attach it to the shape so that the name of the shape becomes that piece of information in the table. Again, don't worry if you're not following this. It should become clear as we work through. So recycle the code, copy paste, Control C and Control V here. You can just see that in your screenshot. Let's move this over a little bit. You'll see I'm using underscore. So if you have a space, then an underscore, you can continue the same line of code on a new line. I'm doing that a lot because I've got space constraints here to keep the screenshot looking good. But that can be useful. So it's something worth remembering the underscore to continue on a new line. So selection.name equals sheets engine. That sounds right. We're on the engine sheet. .range E3. That's not right. Okay, so we need to tweak this code to get it working. So you might want to stop the video now. What do we have to change about this line of code to make sure it's pulling out the piece name from the table? Remember, we want the piece name. What do you think? Stop the video if you like. Okay, so piece name is in column C. So I'm going to change this E3 to C3. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's give it a test again. What have we got on the board sheet? Let's just delete this shape here. Okay, and work through the code again. F8 key, copying the shape, selecting the board sheet, pasting in the shape. And then we want to change the name of the shape. Now, if the line of code is highlighted, the line of code has not run yet. It's the next line of code that will run when you hit the F8 key again. So I'm going to hit the F8 key now. If you look in the top left-hand corner, we're expecting the name of the shape to change to, I think it was W pawn 1, something like that. So hitting the F8 key now, and we can see that the name of the shape has changed. So happy with that for now. That seems to be working well. So we've managed to copy paste the shape. In fact, let's just test that again quickly. To prove it's working, I'm going to change the entry in the table to white pawn 1. Okay, so I've changed the entry in the table. That should now be reflected in the name when the name is created if we run the code again, just to make us believe it, just for some extra testing and for us to believe that this information is coming from the table as well. So again, F8, stepping through, selecting the board sheet, pasting in the shape. And now if you keep an eye on the top left, the name box, F8 key, and we can see we've now got white pawn 1. And that white pawn 1, just going to delete the shape again. That white pawn 1 is of course the name that we've inputted into the table. So super powerful example, so common in Excel VBA, the spreadsheet working together with VBA to get a job done really quickly. So I'm going to change this back to W pawn 1. So I'm happy with that. But you'll notice we are beginning to get a problem here. I've already wasted quite a lot of time deleting shapes, effectively deleting pieces. So at this point, it would be nice to put some code in to delete the shapes automatically. Yep, so that I don't have to keep going back in and deleting the shapes. As we build up the number of pieces, the number of shapes, that's going to become annoying. So let's deal with this now. Now, if you've seen other videos on the channel, I've got a video about creating a custom VBA-based navigation system in Excel with lots of shapes at the top of the sheet. If you check out that series, you'll see how to delete shapes. But let's just go through this code quickly. And you might want to think, okay, you might want to stop the video yourself and see if you can create the code yourself. If you can't create the code yourself, try to think conceptually. Think conceptually about the techniques you might use. Yeah, even if you don't know the exact code, what techniques would we use to get this job done? Okay, so I'm going to declare a variable here. Okay, so declare the variable, and then we're going to use a loop and a collection. a loop and a collection. That's going to work like this. Okay, so for each Chris shape in sheets board.shapes. Okay, not sure what happened there. Okay, yeah, I've missed out the word each in a rush as usual. There we go, for each. Okay, so we've got another very common coding construct. You know, the message that I'm trying to get through really in a lot of the videos is, yeah, coding looks complicated, but a lot of the time it's the same constructs repeated, the same techniques repeated. And this, again, is a really common technique. So combining together a variable with a loop in order to loop through a collection. Now, Excel consists of these collections in its object hierarchy. A spreadsheet consists of a collection of sheets. A sheet consists of a collection of cells, and there's lots of other collections as well. And you'll pick these up as you learn more VBA. One such collection is the shapes on a worksheet. The shapes on a worksheet. So we can harness that information, if you like, and just say to Excel, yeah, you know this collection of shapes you've got that you have already in your memory, in your hierarchy, do something to each of those shapes. That's what we're saying to Excel. So for each Chris shape in sheets board.shapes, then we can say Chris shape dot delete. So we're effectively saying, yeah, do something to each of the shapes on the sheet. In this case, the instruction is to delete the shapes. Now this should work well. We might have problems later when we have more shapes on the sheet. We might put other shapes on the board sheet that aren't pieces. And if that's the case, we'd have to put a conditional statement in here to ensure that it's only deleting the pieces that we want it to delete. But I'm happy with this at the moment. I'm happy to test this. Okay, so save the file, Control S. Always important to save the file before testing a whole macro, particularly one with a loop in, because you might end up looping and looping and in a situation where you can't get out of the loop. So let's hit the play button. Okay, and the shape has disappeared. So I'm happy with that for the time being. So we've got a routine there to quickly delete the shapes. I'm just going to leave that in the Visual Basic Editor for the time being. Okay, good. So I think we're ready now to think about scaling up this code. Yeah. So here we're going to get to the real kind of theme, the main theme of the video, which is, yeah, how can we quickly scale up a piece of code in order to repeat a task many times and get a piece of work done really quickly. This is how it is with a lot of coding tasks. They're kind of front-loaded. So there's a lot of work to do in the beginning and you don't seem to make any progress. Last video and this video, I've been doing a lot of code, a lot of explanation, but we haven't done much. You know, we've only got a piece of code to create a single shape at the moment and to position it on the board. Not doing much, doesn't seem like we're doing much, but we've actually made a lot of progress because we've created this code that we know, that we're happy with, that we've tested, that seems to be accurate. That's now the foundation for doing a fairly complex task very, very quickly. We've got this code that we know is working. We can put the loops in very quickly now to loop through it as many times as we want to get the task done. So with a coding task, there seems to be a lot of work at the beginning when you're not making a lot of progress. If you can push through that, you'll find you accelerate very quickly towards the end. And that's when you get the real satisfaction from completing a coding task. So let's hope we can complete it. So how are we going to scale up this code? At the moment, we're creating a single pawn. How do we create all the pieces? You might want to stop the video here and think about that. Well, there's a few things we have to think about. So we've got the table here. We're using the table to name the pieces, to give information about the pieces. We've currently only got 2 pieces in there. So we're going to have to pay attention to the table. What else are we going to have to think about? Well, we've talked about repeating a task many times using a loop. So we've got to think about the loop control. At the moment, we're just saying for counter equals 1 to 1, that means Excel is going to just go through the loop one time. That's not the idea. We want to go through the loop multiple times. So we've got to think about how we're going to control the loop. Yeah, the simplest way to do that would just be to change this number. If we change this to 1 to 2, then we should loop through this loop twice. In fact, now's a good time to test that. So 1 to 2. So this again I think is a good coding approach. We know it works. Let's push it forward a little bit. See if we can get it to work again. Steady and systematic approach. Okay, let's see what happens. Good. So we've now got two pieces on here. What are the names of the pieces? We've got W pawn 2 and W pawn 1. So the names seem to be right, but the positioning doesn't quite seem to be right yet. We want this pawn to be positioned in this square here. So I'm not quite sure why that's happened. So let's go through it, try to understand what's going on, although I have a suspicion now, having looked at the code. Are we going to delete the pieces manually now? Delete the shapes manually? We don't have to do that because we've created a nice little routine here to delete the shapes automatically. Okay, so what's going on here? Again, you might want to stop the video and just try to debug this code. We can see the code is not going into the right places yet. Okay, the shapes are not going into the right places rather. Okay, so I'm just going to step through this code, try to understand what's going on. There we go. So we've got a shape and then the name of the shape just changed. So what's going to happen here? Okay, counter, there we go, vertical position. Okay, so we've now got some values allocated to the variable, seems to make sense. Okay, let's see what happens now. Now that is interesting. Okay, there we go. Now, I expected this to return an error. We've got shapes oval 1 here and shapes oval 1. So VBA is asking for a shape on the sheet called oval 1. Is there a shape on the sheet called oval 1? Well, there isn't, because we just changed the name of the shape there to W pawn 1. So I would expect that to return an error because Excel wouldn't be able to find the shape, but it hasn't returned an error. But let's put that to one side for now. Let's think about how can we get this, this code working. So the name of the shape here is effectively hard-coded, we could say, because it's typed in text there. How do we want that to work? Well, rather than it working like this, we want the name of the shape to change every time we go through the loop. We want the name of the shape to change every time we go through the loop. That sounds complicated, but it's a mechanism that we've already built in because we've got, for example, we've got the positioning references changing every time we go through the loop. How does the existing mechanism work? If we're thinking about the positioning, well, we have two variables here that are taking the value from the table, and we're then using those variables, the values of the variable, to position the pieces. So let's replicate that mechanism, and let's define a variable here, shape name, and this is going to be a string variable because it's text. So dim shape name as string. And then we've got to define the variable. So this name we have in the table, we want to allocate to a variable. Again, if you're not following this, just keep following the video. It should become clear at the end. So here we're allocating some values to variables. So again, I'm going to recycle this code because I know it works okay. So let's say get shape name here. Okay, and again, I need an adjustment to this code. So what column are the shape names in? They're in column C. So let's change this to C3. Okay, so I'm going to test this now. I've just made a small change. I want to test particularly, there we go, type in the name of the variable. There we go. I want to test in particular that the name of the piece as typed into this column is being allocated to this shape name variable. So I've just made a change. I want to make sure everything's okay. We're going to test it. Stepping through the code, F8 key, we've got our shape there. Okay, this line of code is the one I'm interested in. execute the line of code. How do you find the value of a variable without doing anything or using a message box, something like that? You could use the watch window, which is an option for us, but I prefer just to hover the cursor over the variable. Hover the cursor over the variable, we can see the value of the variable. So shape name does equal w-pawn1. So we know the correct name is being allocated to the variable. So that's good, and that's a small step. But there's another step here. Remember, we had the shape names here hard-coded. So this is going to be problematic. We don't want the names to be hard-coded. We want the names to change every time we go through the loop, and we want to work through the piece names. So what are we going to do here? You might want to stop the video again. How are we going to harness what we've just done, the variable, the value assigned to the variable, take that, incorporate it into these two lines of code? How might that work? You might want to stop the video, try to do it yourself. Okay, so this hard-coded name, rather than hard-coding text there, we're going to just use the variable. Remember, the name is allocated to the variable, so the variable is like a place to store the name. Every time we go through the loop, that name is going to change. It's allocated to the variable. That means we're going to reference a different shape on the sheet. Again, don't worry if you're not following. Stay with me, and we'll see if we can make it all work. Okay, so we've got a variable name here. Let's go through that in a second. Just delete the shapes one more time. Okay, and here we go. Let's work through this step by step then. So debug, step into, and then the F8 key if you're on Windows PC, stepping through the code, copying the reference shape. So we're saying counter from 1 to 2. So we're going through the loop twice. So this is going to test, are we getting the right information? Are we working down that table? Is the loop working properly? Are the variables getting the right information from the table? So exactly what we want to test, but in a kind of controlled environment, only going through the loop twice. Hopefully shouldn't get too confused, but we'll see how we do. Select the board sheet, paste in the shape, looks good. Change the name of the shape, looks good. We can see it changed. Okay, then we're taking 3 values from the table and allocating them to variables. Go through those. Yep, so 7 rows down seems to be accurate. 1 column across seems to be accurate. The shape name is w-pawn1. Just to remind us, we've taken the information from the table here, and we're using the offset method here to get the right information from the table. You can go back to the previous videos if you want to go through that again. So scroll down a little bit here. So now we're getting into what we're interested in here. So this line of code is changing the top property of the shape. Remember, the top property controls the vertical position of the shape, how high or low it appears on the spreadsheet. Okay. Okay, there we go. I was just going through the code again. If you want a detailed explanation of how this works, just go back to the previous video, maybe even the video before. But the important thing is we've got the variable in here now, the shape name variable. Let's hover the cursor over the variable. We can see the information that the variable is storing. Now that is the name of the shape that we want to change the position of. There we go. So I'm going to execute this line of code. I'm expecting the shape's position to change. Okay, F8, and there it goes, vertical position. Now the same thing, just checking the code for horizontal position. Okay, there we go, seems to be working well. So we've been through the loop once. If I hover over the counter variable, I can now see the value of counter is 2. So now we're going through the loop the second time. Okay, pasting in another shape, seems to be working well. Changing the name of the shape, and it's w-pawn2, seems to be working well. Taking the values from the table again. Now the important thing to understand here, the value of the counter variable, which is controlling the loop. So every time we go through the loop, it increases by 1. The value of the counter variable has increased by 1. Why is that critically important? Well, that means that we're going 1 row further down. When we use the offset method, we're going 1 row further down. So we've taken not the value from row 4, we've taken the value from row 5. this time. Again, such a common, important VBA technique, using a loop with for next. The loop, a variable rather, the value of the variable increases by 1 each time we go through the loop, and that allows us to work through a table. Okay, so let's check the value of these variables. Rows down is now 7, cols across is now 2, because we're taking the value from row 5, the second row in our table, and shape name is now w.2 for the same reason. Scrolling down, let's go back to the board sheet so we can see this happening. Okay, there we go. F8 key, position changed, vertical position changes, F8 key again, horizontal position changes. Okay, seems to be, I think I'm happy with that. Yeah, we've gone through that step by step, doing a little bit of testing, and seems to be working fine. Okay, so a question now is, happy we've done a small, like a prototype, if you like. We've done a small scale problem of the actual problem that we're looking at. Can we now quickly scale this up? So I'll stop going on and see if we can actually scale this up. So let's try to create all of the pawns first. So let's have 6 more cells here. And then let's have W pawn 3. And then I'm going to use a formula to do this quickly. W pawn and W pawn and the row reference -3. There we go. Almost. Okay, there we go. I won't go into too much into how that works, but you can, pause the video and see how that formula is working there. Control D to autofill down. And then I just want to take the values because I did put a formula in there. I don't want those formulae hanging around. Control C, Control Alt V, and V to take the values there. Okay, and then rows down. This is going to be 7 for all of the pieces because all of the pieces are on the same row. Then cols across is going to increase by 1 each time. There we go. Okay, and again, just going to make sure I've got values here. Control C, Control Alt V, and V again means that we take the values. Okay, so quickly populated that table. So what's going to happen now? Well, now we've got eight pieces there. 8 pawns, rather. Well, technically, a pawn is not. Some people say it's not a piece in chess. Anyway, that really doesn't matter. So we've got to control how many times we're going through the loop. We want to go through the loop 8 times now. So let's replace this with an 8. Reset the code. Before I run the code, I'm going to make sure that the existing shapes are deleted. There we go. Okay, and then let's run the code. Let's see what happens. Okay, run the code, and we've got our 8 pawns there. Okay, so that seems to be working really nicely there. Okay, that's as far as we're going to go in this video. So we've got, what have we done? Let's try to summarize. So we've taken a piece of code that we knew was working well, that was positioning some shapes, taken that code and then scaled it up. We've scaled it up by making the code do a little bit more, allocating a name to the shape, and then eventually working through the loop more times. And in this case, we worked through the loop 8 times because we've got 8 pieces down here. Now, I'll be repeating myself, but the mechanics on show here, they are so common. And I always say to people with Excel VBA, you don't need to know everything. In my view, you don't need to know most things. You just need to know a few things. An important subset of skills can deliver disproportionate benefit. A subset of skills is what you need to know, and you can get so much done with them. And you'll see that in my videos. It's really the same techniques repeated. And we've got the usual suspects here. We've got a loop here, a for next loop. So that allows us to repeat a task. We've got the offset command, the offset method here, working with the variable. So remember, offset means move away from. So we're moving away from a cell in the table, and that's allowing us to take a value from the table, but we're going to move down 1 more value each time we work through the loop, because the counter variable is going to increase by 1 each time we go through the loop. That's going to have the effect of working down through the table. So a really beautiful mechanism. So we can just change something in the table. For example, let's change the last pawn. Let's put it on the other side of the board, just to show you how quickly we can change this, clear out the pieces, run the code again, and you can now see the pawn is almost being promoted right up there on the 7th rank. So that's how quickly we can change things by combining a table in a spreadsheet with the Visual Basic coding. Okay, what else is of note here? We've got our loop, we've got assigning values to variables. That variables can be good for storing information, makes things easier to understand and more efficient. Yeah, I think that's everything. So I really recommend stepping through this code, F8 key on a PC. You can do it on Mac as well, using the step through button. Align the Visual Basic editor with the spreadsheet so that you can understand what's going on. Really try to understand this code, because there's so much useful stuff in this code. One thing I've got to remember is we did record some code right at the beginning. So yeah, I talk about code coming from 3 sources. It can be organic code that you write yourself. Things like loops, you have to write yourself. You can't record a loop. And the macro recorder, I find anything to do with formatting can get complicated. Copy pasting as well. It's a good idea to record that code and then tweak it. Then the third source of code is recycling code. So if we have code that we know works well, then we should copy paste it, tweak it, and get it working for us. We've done that in our video. So we've used different sources of code. We wrote some code organically ourselves. We recorded some using the macro recorder, and we recycled some code that we knew was working. Okay, and using those 3 different approaches, you're going to have, plenty of vocabulary, if you like. So lots of different things you'll be able to do with code. You'll certainly be able to get the things done that you need to get done. Okay, so quick recap there, quick summary rather. So what do we need to do next? Well, we need to continue scaling this approach up, and we need to put the other pieces in here. So we want the king, the queen, knights, the bishops, and rooks at the back here. So in the next video, we'll try to do that for both sides, but we've got a bit more than that to do, because we've got to think about, the text in the shape has got to change for each piece. If it's a rook, we want an R there. If it's a queen, we want a Q there, etc. So we've got to think about the text in the shape, and we've got to think about the color of the shape too, because we want white shapes and black shapes. So if you're feeling inspired by this video, then try to do that yourself. Before next week, try to take that task and see if you can work through it. We'll only be using the same approaches that we've used here. So there we go. That's as far as we're going to go in this video. Thanks for watching. Going to go and grab Kuda, my puppy, now, because a few people have been asking for more Kuda. So we'll introduce her quickly, and then we'll say bye. So bear with me a second. Kuda, come here, darling. Good girl. Good girl. How are you? Were you sleeping? Come here, darling. Let's go say hello. Good girl. You sleepy? Sleepy girl. Good girl. Okay. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to try to hold her a bit closer to the camera this time. Whoa! There she is, very excited. She doesn't come in this room much. And yet she's getting big now, really quite heavy to hold. So we're having to take her out walking and stuff a lot. Yeah, but here she is. And I'll see if I can, yawny. I'll see if I can introduce her at the end of each video, but I can't guarantee I'll be able to hold her, in a couple of weeks. So there we go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video on the channel, or hopefully another video in this series.